this morning, and I know a lot of your faces are very familiar because I've been here before a couple of different times. But I appreciate Darren giving me a call and asking me to come and share my knowledge and my expertise and years of service with you. And when he said, oh, you've got about 20, 25 minutes, I said, oh my, I've got 30 plus years of HR experience, and it's like that equals out to maybe 1 minute for every year, so I'm either going to have to talk really fast, and I didn't have enough coffee to do that yet this morning, or just summarize and briefly go over human resources, and I think specifically Darren wanted me to emphasize hiring processes. And so I thought we'd narrow it down to that, but I wanted to leave plenty of time to make sure that we answer any of your questions that you might have. And how much time do I actually have? What time do you normally get out here? Because if you don't give me a time frame, I can talk forever.
20 to 45.
Okay, all right. Real quick, I'm Andie Metcalf with The Key Element. I've been doing outsourcing of human resources and consulting since 1996. So that dates me. I've been on a part-time and a full-time basis doing this. And so really human resources is all about people. The way I came up with the name The Key Element is, what's the key element of any business? People, your people. And so when you treat your people right and you treat them fair and you're consistent with them, then most of the time things are going to work out just fine. So if you don't remember anything else when you leave here today, other than make sure that you treat your people consistent, you treat them fairly, and you document, document, document. Write down dates, times, things that happen. And it doesn't have to be in any formal fashion. Just make sure that you document what's going on, who said what, possibly have a witness in the room, and so forth. The last thing I want you to remember is treat people the way you want to be treated. And most of the time things are going to go fairly well when you're dealing with human beings. Now, have you ever heard the golden rule to customer service? Anybody? What's the golden rule to customer service?
Customer's always right.
Well, the customer's always right, but treat the customer the way you want to be treated. That's the golden rule. We take it in human resources one step further, and it's the platinum rule. Anybody take a stab at what the platinum rule is? No? Platinum rule is treat your customers or your employees the way they want to be treated. And there's a big difference because every one of us in this room is different, and we want and we need and we are motivated and we're energized by different things. And so by talking to your employees, find out what leadership style they work best under. What do they need when they're struggling? What happens when they're stressed and frustrated? So by talking to your people, finding out about them, and then treating them the way they want to be treated. If you don't know them very well, treat them the way that you would want to be treated. And then if you can take it one step farther, then that's much better off. How many of you have employees? And how many? What are we talking about when we're saying I've got one employee, I've got 15 employees, I've got 50, I've got over 100? 4, 2, 35, 1. Here, and then you've got it. He's looking for one more. 20? So nobody over 50 in this room. Okay, other than I know if you're associated with a larger company. When we talk, and actually I really didn't need to say anything more about human resources after Craig's 10 things about human resources. I thought those were excellent. And human resources is all about people. And when you think about business, when you go into business and you started your business, what did you first think of first? You probably wanted to call Aaron on the accounting side of things, because you think, okay, dollar signs, just see dollar signs. I want to start a business, not only because I have a passion about doing this kind of work, but I see dollar signs. So when businesses get started, they always think, okay, we need to go to a bookkeeper, an accountant, we need to go to a banker. But what they don't think a lot of times is, I'm going to be dealing with people, and so I need the human touch, the human side of things, and that's what human resources is all about. But when we talk about employees in here, thanks to our government, how many laws do you think there are out there in regards to mandating what employers can and cannot do?
Too many.
Too many? 5, 10?
Too many.
Anybody? And our attorney left the room, so I was going to hit him up too. You've got, this is just a random thing, 2 pages just on employment law, and I highlighted the ones that apply to businesses under 15 employees. And so we've got too many laws that regulate us, but how many of those laws do you actually know and do you actually apply, comply with? And so it gets really burdensome when you're talking about what you can and cannot do. And so first off, what you want to make sure is when you are ready to hire, we're going to talk a little bit about the hiring process, is that financially you're ready, you're set, you've had it budgeted, and you can actually afford that employee that you want. So there's a plug for Aaron. Go see Aaron to make sure that your numbers are all set and you've got some profit and budgeted there. But once you are ready to hire, what's the first step? What do you think the first step is in hiring? Advertising? Okay. That's a stop. Finding the right person. The first step is actually the planning, the strategic part of it. You need to know, first off, what your vision, what your mission is. Good leaders have a vision. They practice that vision, and they're very passionate about that vision and that mission statement, and they're able to communicate that to other people. So in your mind, if Scott knows how he wants to grow kites, he has to be able to communicate that to others and put that down in writing with expectations. So one of the first things is when you want to hire somebody is to think about what that person is actually going to do. What are the duties? What are the responsibilities? What are the essential job functions that person's going to be held responsible for? And so then comes the part about writing a job description. Not only what are those essential job functions, but what requirements, what minimum qualifications, what minimum education does it take to end up hiring those individuals? And then, of course, when you're dealing with laws, you want to make sure that you don't discriminate against anyone. And so, it would take probably a 3-4 day, full day sessions just to talk about all of the different laws. And I didn't want to bombard you with laws, but think about when you're advertising, when you're preparing that job posting or help wanted, and you've got to make sure that your wording is correct, that you don't discriminate, that you don't say college students, energetic college students needed to do such and such, because then you're possibly discriminating against someone of an older fashion. So you have to be very careful. There are certain laws and regulations where if you have a bona fide need for a college student or a male or a female, you can do that. Say, for example, we had bathroom attendants, and you wanted a male attendant in the male's restroom and a female attendant in the female's restroom, then you can specifically say males wanted for this job or females wanted, because that's a bona fide reason, and they need, certain. That's pretty obvious why you want that. In the acting profession, you might need a certain role filled. So there are different positions, and so when you first hire, you have to think about as far as what qualifications, what experience, what education, and what type of person am I looking for. You also have to look at the employees that you currently have, if you have some, what kind of personality is going to fit into and fit with the current team that you have. When you're interviewing, it's so simple to fall into a rut and hire the same kinds of people that are just like you. So it's so much more fun to hire people that are just like you. But to have a good team, you need a variety of different skills, strengths, weaknesses, so you can have a wide variety of different individuals on your team. Because if you have all people on your team that like to socialize and talk and great with customers, but you had work back behind the scenes that needed to get done, nobody would ever get their work done. So you have to think about what are those specific tasks and responsibilities that you need to make sure that you're getting that right team. Tell me a little bit about, as far as after you talk about your job descriptions and you find out what's needed, then we go into posting that job. We advertise that. Are there any places or any, I'm thinking of all the different employers in the room, any specific areas that you go to advertise when you are looking for people? Craigslist, okay, and that's become the more popular one. Of course, over time, the internet now has become probably the #1 tool. Do many of you still post ads in the Manhattan Mercury?
We do.
Okay, so you have to look at your market and determine where and what is the best place for your industry. Have you thought about videos, getting a TV ad or a radio ad, or the internet is a wide tool. We have a Kansas Workforce Center here in town that has a free job link that you can post your jobs on that is beneficial as well. Small Business Development Center can help out in those kinds of areas as well.
We went to the chamber.
The chamber, yes, because if you're a member of the chamber, you can post. If you're under so many employees, I think it's under 50 employees, there's nationjobs.com. And so a lot of times you can branch out to not only the area, but if you want a full market, then of course you can go to Kansas City, Wichita, Topeka. So when you are advertising for an opening, you've got to strategically think about where am I going to attract and who do I have to reach out to in order to get the best qualified employees. One of the best referral sources are your current employees. So when you have an opening, how many of you post your jobs? Okay. Post those jobs internally. Let those people that are currently working for you know that you're looking for this particular position. I don't know if you have any policies or procedures in regards to internal transfers, but there could be somebody within your organization that actually wants to change positions or take on new added skills and requirements. So a lot of times by opening it up to people internally, you can fill that position, but then it's a trickling effect because then you've still got at the very end an open position. Think about the duties and the responsibilities, and could you actually combine roles and save from hiring where you could spread out those duties internally as well. So there's all kinds of things to think about when you're getting ready to hire. As far as the internal referral program, some companies will actually reward their employees for recommending someone from outside of the company, and if that person works out to be a good employee, then you might pay a small incentive to the employee that made the referral, or a larger referral amount. But a lot of times if an employee knows that they're going to get some reimbursement for someone that's coming in, they're not going to recommend someone that they think will fail, because ultimately it's a bad influence on them and their character. So hopefully you'll get the best referrals from your current employees or from a network organization such as this, by letting people know that you've got these openings, and if you know someone in this particular area, send them that way. So that's one of the best ways to do it. When we talk about hiring, we talk about specific laws, and a couple of laws that I want to make sure that you are familiar with, and you can do some research or you can give me a call, is the FLSA. That's the Fair Labor Standards Act. This act and this law sort of mandates or requires regulations in overtime pay, minimum wage, child labor, anything that has to do, it has to regulate meal times and breaks. And you've got the FLSA on a federal level, and you've also got laws on a state level. And Kansas is pretty liberal with our laws, I think, as far as meal and break periods. But you've got to be aware of a lot of these different laws when you're bringing employees in. So if you have, how many of you have policies and procedures already set and established in your office? Okay, good. Sort of, so. You want to make sure that those laws comply with your FLSA regulations as well. And minimum wage, anybody know what minimum wage is right now? $7.25. $7.25. But if you think $7.75, that's okay, because then you're treating your employees more fair, and that's what it's all about, is being fair and consistent. You also have to think about, are you having full-time employees, part-time employees? Are you going to hire interns? Are you hiring contractors that deal with contracts in the federal government? Are you hiring independent contractors? And Darren mentioned you've got a tax seminar tomorrow that specifies what an independent contractor is, because if you're treating an individual that you pay wages to as an independent contractor and they don't follow the laws or the guidelines and they're truly an employee based by the classification, then what happens is that you get penalized big time. And independent contracting in the legislation last year was a huge ordeal, and they've come down with very strict guidelines. And so you want to be careful there. You want to make sure that they are eligible to work in the U.S. They are not aliens and can't, you know, I think of the words alien, I think of those little green antennas, you know, they pop up maybe after dark. But you want to make sure that they have a work permit or a visa and they're allowed to work in the U.S. Because that'll get you into big trouble. Once you actually, not actually after you hire, but these are things to think about before you hire, is to determine their status. Are they going to be an exempt or a non-exempt employee? And do you know what those two mean and the difference between exempt and non-exempt? Okay? Exempt is more of an executive management type of level. They are exempt from your federal wage and hour statutes, which means that they get a base wage every month. They get a salary that is the same every month, regardless of the number of hours that they work. So they might work 5 hours, they might work 55 hours, but it is the same pay every pay period or every month. And they do not get paid overtime. Okay? When you hear the word salary, you can have a salaried employee either be exempt or non-exempt. So be very careful when you say my employees are salaried, and you might say salaried, non-exempt. Okay, so what's non-exempt? Non-exempt is where, under the federal wage and hour statutes, that you have to pay them for every hour that they work, and you have to need to stay over here. For every hour worked, and if they work over 40 hours in a work week, then you have to pay them overtime, and that's time and a half of their hourly pay. So when you have non-exempt employees, you have to make sure that they're tracking their hours worked. If you're in a kind of industry where they can take work home, you still have to make sure that they're recording their time. And so, do any of you have time clocks? A computer system where you track their hours worked. You know, it used to be the old days, everybody had a time clock, they would come in, they'd punch it. When they went to lunch, they'd punch out, came back from lunch, punch back in, at the end of the day, they'd punch out again. It sort of reminds me of Fred Flintstone, you know, at 5 o'clock, Fred sliding down the dinosaurs. I'm dating myself and Fred Flintstone, but having to punch that time clock. Now we have, with our smartphones, there are systems out there, there's software out there where they can clock in and clock out right on their smartphone, right into your system. A lot of small businesses just take the employees' words that they were here at 8 o'clock, or they have foremans, or they have supervisors that say, okay, yep, Darren was here at 8 o'clock in the morning, and yes, he went to lunch at 12 o'clock, he was back at 1, and out at 5. So, but as far as record-keeping laws, if you were ever audited, and Aaron can probably vouch for this, if they came in, they would want to see your records of the pay history, what jobs that the individuals have done, as well as what you pay them, what benefits you offer, and there's a whole slew of other things that might be audited in regards to your employees. So that's another issue as far as record keeping. But if you want to make sure that you understand what you're classifying them as, if they're hourly employees, then they would be considered non-exempt. Another thing to think about is how you're going to pay your employees. Are you going to pay them by the week, every other week, bi-weekly, or are you going to pay them monthly, and so forth? One of the things also to think about is setting those employees up on direct deposit, where it's automatically deposited right into a checking account or a savings account for that employee, which saves you time and it's less chance of someone losing a check. They can still receive a pay stub, but it's less hassle sometimes from the employer. So make sure to figure out what is exempt and non-exempt. By law, under the exemption status, if you want to say my employee is exempt and I'm not going to pay them overtime, but they don't meet the criteria of the government's classifications, then you can get into big trouble. And you've got pretty much 5 or 6 different categories. You have executives, you have professionals, administrative type of work, outside salespeople, and technical computer individuals. Those are the classifications that are pretty much, if you can follow along the tests and the guidelines that the government sets, you can say this person is a an exempt employee and you won't have to pay overtime. So there's all kinds of guidelines and regulations there. The EEO, the Equal Employment Opportunity, or the Equal Opportunity Employment Act, is another law, along with FLSA, that you need to pay particular attention to, and that is by treating everyone equal. You don't discriminate against race, religion, sex, national origin, disability, color, age. Those are all the no-nos that can get you into major trouble if you hire someone and you discriminate against them. 5 minutes, thank you. Okay, go second. That's 5 questions. Okay. So there are different laws that you have to be very careful about. So and in regards to, let me jump over to, I know someone, Darren sent me something about interview questions. What can we ask and what can we not ask? Here again, if you stick to the basic requirements of the job, the essential job functions, then you'll be fine in an interview. You cannot ask someone's age. You cannot ask as far as what religion they are. You cannot ask if they have any children, if they're married, things like that. And that'll get you into trouble. Specifically ask about their experience and their work background and how it applies to your job. And here again, when you're interviewing and you're hiring, a job description comes in extremely handy in regards to letting you stay focused on what the job entails, as well as letting that employee, the prospective employee, know what's they're going to be held accountable for. In the interview process, what I like to use is I like to profile the actual job, find out what type of personality and traits and things are needed for that particular job, and then when I get down to my final candidates, I profile the candidates to see if their profile is going to mix and match. I also use those profiles in team building with other employees, and it's a very useful tool in that regard. But example for a question, have any of you ever said, when did you graduate from high school or college? Ever asked that? On your application, do any of you have employment applications, or you just accept resumes? Okay, I would highly recommend employment applications to be filled out, as well as have employees submit a resume. On a resume, they can say anything and everything they want to say, and make themselves look really great. On the application, you can have a couple of paragraphs on there asking that this information is true and everything on here is accurate. And then if it's not, if you find out later that they lied or deceived you in their background, then that would be grounds for either disciplinary action up to including termination of employment. So I highly recommend an employment application. And here, for example, instead of saying, when did you graduate from high school, say, did you graduate from high school or college? Because you don't necessarily want to know the year that they graduated, because that could then refer to you've discriminated against them because of their age. Or a question like, what is your date of birth, or how old are you? You can't legally ask that, but you can say, are you over the age of 18? Especially if you are serving liquor, they've got to be over the age of 21. So you've got child labor laws, and I think I'm going to just, I could go on and on. I've got all kinds of things. I have like 4 or 5 pages of notes, and I know that way too much information, but I'm opening it up for questions.
One thing I didn't know about